Greetings, and today I am here to sort of share you guys this thread that I found on Reddit that shows more cards that have been revealed for the new Iron Judgement expansion. So here are all the cards that have been listed. I'm actually looking pretty. I think the 5 that I have seen before are here. Yeah, like Knickers, you've seen Dwarf Berserker, Cave Troll, Greater Brothers, and Studying Blow. So I probably won't be covering them again, but I think I'll have a. But like, if there's any card here that has good combo with these cards, then I'll probably like reference them throughout the video. So without any further ado, I'm actually pretty excited. Let's get straight into these cards. So the first card on this list, we have, what's this card called again? Yes, this card's called Natural Selection. So it's a 4 provision card. It lets you damage an enemy unit by 4, and any excess damage lets you spawn an Arach's drone or a random allied row. This is actually pretty helpful for control Arach's queen decks, because for a card that's this cheap, and if you like, obviously the most Arach's drone you're gonna get is, or the most you'll get is 3, because best case scenario you hit this thing on a 1 point unit. But the thing with Arach's drone, I think it doesn't have a lot of options for damage, so you kind of almost have to rely on, well, not luck, but like, you know, hoping. Sorry about that. So back to the video. So yeah, so this card provides a pretty decent damage output for a very cheap card. Now the thing is, you kind of have to decide, is this card going to become a damage output card, or is it going to help you with control? Because both are good. Like, that's why it helps with the Arach's Queen even better, because it gives you an option for that removal, or you can use it to sort of buff up your control, even though I think that the Arach's Queen control decks are already pretty strong as it already is. But this card just sort of help give that boost. So this card's pretty good. I can't wait to see it in action when it comes out, so it should be fun. The next card on this list is an old favorite of mine back in the day when this card was still in Gwent. I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot that this card was removed. My apologies. It's hard for you guys to see. It's so big, but let me see if I can make it a bit smaller here. Okay, so we have, this is, I believe it's the Redanian Knight, if I can remember. So it is a 4 provision card. It is 2 power with 1 armor. And what it does is, at the end of every allied turn, boost by self with, by 1 if A, it still has armor, and B, it is played on the ranged row. And it has a second ability, which is exposed. So when this card, I believe, is out of armor, then this card gets moved to the melee row. Then the highest enemy unit is damaged by 2. So this card is pretty good in both ways. This is obviously going to be a card that opponents will not want to damage, because obviously you don't want that secondary effect happening. But at the same time, its barricade effect is actually even stronger than the exposed. So this card will just hit you pretty much any other way. Really, the only way for you to get rid of it without getting its max value is to just outright get rid of it. So probably an Alzur's Thunder will do it. So I guess that's why they have this card at pretty low value, at only being 2 power. So it does make for a pretty easy removal, which probably explains why it actually has some pretty powerful effect. But at the same time, I don't know how much of your resources you're willing to expend just for a card like this. But if you do keep it on for too long, I can see it being a bit of a strong engine if kept for too long. Plus, with that armor, it won't really lose a lot of power anyway. So yeah, it should be interesting. Can't wait. I think Northern Realms is getting a pretty strong boost with this already, with the whole armor. But it's not just Northern Realms, obviously, that's getting cards. I believe the last card was a monsters card, of course. So, but like this new introduction of a new mechanic coming into the Northern Realms, it already has its charges, its orders, its Blue Stripes Commando, which, let's be honest, it's in its own league. I'm not gonna count it as part of the orders. And adding armor, ooh, it's gonna be a lot of Northern Realms I'm seeing in the future here. Next card we have here is Mantlet. It is a 5 provision card with 4 power and 1 armor. So when this card is in the melee row, whenever a unit is played, it gets 1 armor. But as long as it has the armor, it gets 2 armor instead. So I can see this is definitely going to support cards that require shields. So the Dwarven, I forgot the name of those dwarves. from yesterday that we saw. It's definitely going to help them out, and this is a neutral card, so it can be played in any faction. It's definitely going to help support the Redanian Knight that we just saw earlier, so I can see this card actually being in a lot of decks. Plus it's only 5 provision, so it's not that expensive. Plus it's 4 power, which means it's not so easy to get rid of. Obviously cards like 8, I can see cards like AT definitely coming for sure. And a card like Stunning Blow, like what we saw yesterday, is definitely a good answer for this. But at the same time, it's like these cards are already so good and their provisions are so low, right? Like if you're willing to expend those kinds of resources on cards like this, what answers will you have when they play sort of like their main core cards? So that's where they kind of make you think on like what cards are you willing to expend in order to get rid of certain engines. Because I can see this card, similar to the Redanian Knight, to be a pretty big pain in the butt if it is kept on for far too long, because that shield provides extra protection not just for your unit but also for your overall power, because it does not get touched when armor is removed. So interesting, very interesting card. I'm actually liking the cards I'm seeing so far, so it's pretty great. So the next card we have here that has been leaked is known as the Dwarven Chariot. So this is another neutral card. It is a 5 provision. It is 3 power with 1 shield, 1 armor I should say, because shield is, it's like immunity for like 1 turn or something like that, or immunity from damage. Anyway, so on deploy, you spawn a Rowdy Dwarf to this row, and if you play more than 1 copy, then you spawn 2 Rowdy Dwarves on this row instead. This gives a lot of boost to dwarves in the Scoia'tael faction, because this will help cards like Dennis Cramer, Zoltan Chevet, Shelton Skaggs, you know, the list goes on. Even the Mahakam Guard. Is it Mahakam Guard or Defender? I can't remember which one. It's the dwarf with the long spear and the shield, and it's, I think it boosts 1 for every dwarf in the row. So this is pretty powerful, I'll be honest. And if this is a dwarf on its own, actually no, Novigradian Justice might not work, because I think it's, yeah, I don't think Novigradian Justice will work, just because it'll only work once, I think. So never mind. I'm not sure. We'll see. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, so I think this is really gonna help control dwarf get even stronger. So the dwarf control deck is a deck that I have played, and it is on the I have posted it, so check that out if you guys want to. I'll leave a link for that perhaps. But I think this card is going to provide a pretty big boost for them. It's also, again, just a 5 provision card, so it's not super expensive. So I can, yeah, so I think that's sort of the main thing. I mean, I haven't seen the Dwardy Dwarves. I'm going to assume that they have maybe 2 power. But I don't know, that might be a bit too powerful, but yeah, so interesting. I like this. So all the cards I'm seeing so far are giving pretty good boosts to current decks in the meta, which is great. So the next card here is called Mutant Hounds. It is a 4 provision, 3 power with 1 armor. And on deploy, an enemy unit gets bleeding for 2 turns. And on deploy, if you deploy in the range row, you end up poisoning a unit. So I'm not sure how, I mean, I have seen more poison action in Syndicate, but that's through like profit cards. I don't think this card is ever going to see itself in Syndicate. I'm not sure what kind of card this is. I think this is a neutral card, even though it looks like it has like monster related abilities. Bleeding, I have not seen much bleeding action either. Again, it's through Syndicate that I see more bleeding with the Witch Hunter Executioners. But I'm not sure how this card will go. It is pretty cheap. It is pretty powerful. It's obviously not a portal target, because portal targets are always engines. But yeah, we'll see. I'm not sure how I feel about this card. This is the first card I feel that's like on the, you know, S side. Everything else has so far been like pretty great. So the next card we have on this list is a personal favorite of mine, which is Trollololol. I really enjoyed playing him back then when he was still in the Gwent. I think before Homecoming came out, that was when he last appeared. So it is a 7 provision with 4 power and 2 armor with Zeal, and on orders it loses all the armor and boosts itself by the amount. And every time you play a warfare card, it gains 2 armor. So why it gave the Zeal keyword, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I guess in the case that you want to use its ability like almost immediately, you'll get a 6 power, but they'll just become a 7 for 6. I would probably try and keep this for as long as I could with probably the resupply. But the thing is, this is an engine card that relies on other cards, so I can see this card being heavily targeted by players, but it just falls outside the reach of Alzur's Thunder. So I'm not quite sure how much of an effect this will have, or how long it's going to be able to stay in the field for, because they did encourage a bit of the removal stuff. But it's good because, you know, it kind of encourages the use of warfare cards even more. So pretty decent combos, plus with Trollololol just sort of staying there waiting until it gets enough armor, and then you can use its order ability anytime you want, pretty much. That is, of course, unless they expend the resources to get rid of all the armor, in which case there's nothing you can do about it. But I think every time you have a warfare card and it's available for playing, then, you know, he'll just have that ability no matter what, unless they absolutely get rid of him. So I can see this card being a bit of a nuisance to opponents in a way, just simply because of the fact that it is just outside of Alzur's Thunder's reach. But the thing is, it's not outside the reach of assassination, but again, if this card is not on its own in a row, then it's outside the reach of assassination. So for the most part, it's going to be outside the reach of assassination unless it's the first card played and you're playing against Nilfgaard, but those are some pretty special conditions. But other than that, I can see this card staying in the field for quite some time. Best case scenario, they require 2 cards to destroy it. Worst case scenario, they they try and fight with it, and the more warfare cards you play, the more army you get, and it just annoys it even more. So I can see this card being a bit of a, you know, mid to big threat if stayed on the field for too long. The next card we have on the list is, I believe, I don't remember what it's called, Andragora Egg or something like that. Let me confirm. Andraga Egg, that's what it's called. So it is a 4 provision, 4 power monster card, and on Death Wish it spawns 3 drones on the row. Even more support to Arach's Queen. This can be a portal target for sure. Simply have Slizzard come out, or Barbigazi, or Chiron after, and it can consume this. And 3 drones are coming out, which is going to be help for that Glusty Warp combo, or if you're planning to run Yennefer, which I have done in the past. I've also ran Bone Talisman. So a lot of control options now for monsters. So Arach's Queen is getting that boost. I'm liking it, because I've noticed that there's not a lot of monsters gameplay lately in the current meta before Iron Judgement expansion comes out. So I'm pretty excited to see sort of Arach's. Hopefully it makes a good comeback with the support of this card and the first card that we saw on the list. Should be fun. Unless, of course, it gets, unless it gets locked. The only way you prevent this card from having its effect is if it gets locked. But if they try and destroy it, they destroy it. That's 3 drones, which is great. Plus, with the Arach's Queen, it makes a 4th drone if this card itself is destroyed. Oh no, but if it's on your opponent's turn, then obviously it's not going to activate. So worst case scenario, if your opponent destroys it, 3 drones. Best case scenario, if you absorb it, you get 4 drones. So even bonus for you. Which is the next card we have on this list is Ephren Hillergrand from the Nilfgaard faction. It is a 9 provision, 5 power with 1 armor, and if this card is moved to the top of the deck, then it is summoned to the melee row. So I can see this card being a pretty strong combo with cards like Elbrick, with cards like Courier, if the card happens to be in the top 3, or if you have Jan Calvé and this card happens to be the second card, you Jan Calvé the first card, which I believe is the card to your left, if that was the one you choose to play, and this card instantly just gets summoned out. So that's already 5 plus whatever you're doing with Jan Calvé, which is great, but it's sort of manipulation in a way there. And I think that's not so bad, because with Gwent Challenger, with the use of the Tibber deck, the deck was well manipulated. So being able to pull off this card's ability is actually not that bad. The only drawback I could see is the fact that it's 9 provision, and it's actually pretty expensive for a card with only 5 power. But because of its ability to thin the deck, and with Nilfgaard's ability to manipulate the deck pretty well, I can still see this card seeing some play. So, but I'm still just a little bit worried about that provision cost, but you know, because of how powerful it is, I think that's why they made it that high. But with an effect like that, like, you definitely see some combo plays coming involving this card for sure. The next card we have on this list is Tempering. I believe this is a Scoia'tael card, and you boost an allied unit by 5. If it is a dwarf, also give it 2 armor. So again, you're helping out dwarves here a bit more. And it's 4 provision, so it's actually pretty cheap. Plus, it doesn't get targeted by portal, so you can keep your portal in there for your 4-cost dwarves. And this, I think this is mostly meant to help the engine dwarves that we saw yesterday. the Dwarf Berserker, this one. We'll look at it, have a second look at it. So as long as it has armor, it damages itself by 1 and damages a random enemy unit by 1 as well. So it has sort of that long ship effect. But I think this card right here, Tempering, is pretty much meant to help this card out, you know, but I don't think every card's been released, of course. So maybe this card will see some more support with other dwarves, or, you know, any other, with other dwarves that require armor. So we'll see. But as of this moment, I can only see it working for the Dwarven Berserkers. The next card on this list, we have Raiding Fleet. It is a 7 provision special card, which lets you give an enemy unit bleeding for 4 turns and play a random bronze ship from your deck. So with Syndicate, with the coming of, I think his name is Hammond, which is a card that really, which is given sort of the support for ships and pirates. This card, it looks like, seems to be a card that does the same thing as well. I have also made a video on the pirates and ships archetype deck, so I can see myself including this card in the deck as well, because A, it's good for deck thin, and B, it's that progressive damage on an opponent. So, and you have, I think most of the ships do damage as opposed to boost, so that's sort of gonna help progress that pinging, which is great. So I can see this card working for the ships, but honestly, for me, someone like me who loves deck thin, having that bronze card coming out of a deck is great. So you don't have to worry about it being in your hand, just so you can get rid of it, because you don't want to accidentally mulligan into it if you like don't need it at all, right? So, and it's only 7 provisions, so it's actually not that expensive. So next card on this list, we have Living Armor. It is a 12 provision card for 10 power with 10 armor, and this unit's power is equal to its armor. Now, this, I'm going to assume that what this means is that any change made in the armor is changed with the power. So every time this, so I think I can see this card being such a major target for them tall removals. And this is one of those cards where it's like, I can play Alzur's Thunder on this thing, I'll hit it for 5, and its power will go down to 5 as well as its shield. So this thing's health is pretty much reliant on the shield. This card, it's interesting, but at the same time, I'm not sure how much play is gonna be made. Again, it's kind of the context that's confusing me here a little bit, because if it changes every time the armor is changed, this thing's gonna get targeted for attacks. But the thing is, it's 12 provision. So either A, there's a special there's a sort of like a fine print with this, or B, where it's kind of gonna mess up a little bit here, because it's very expensive, and if its health is reliant on its armor, then it's gonna be a major target for cards. But in a way, it can also be good, because if your opponent is taking their time away from sort of your core cards to focus on the living armor, that could be great as well, because it sort of lets your core cards go rampant. I can see that as being sort of the good thing that can come out of this card. Again, until I sort of get the real context, I'm not quite sure what it's going to happen. I'm going to assume that it's going to do that for the time being, but it might change. So yeah, that's the Living Armor card. I like the artwork though. The artwork's pretty cool. I like it. I don't remember seeing it in The Witcher though. Maybe, I don't know if I'm crazy with The Witcher or not, but anyway. So the next card we have on this list is called the Ardfane's Crossbowmen. I hope I'm saying that right. It is a Nilfgaard card with 5 provision, with 3 power and 2 armor. And on deploy, this card lets you damage an enemy unit by 2. And as long as it has armor, whenever you play a soldier, you can damage a random enemy unit by 1. So this is a pretty strong engine card that lets you ping on your opponents every time you play a soldier. And considering that Nilfgaard is actually filled with soldiers, I can see this card being actually a very powerful card as long as it stays on the field. So you got cards that you want to come out, like them Nausicaa Sergeants. I'll have a list of the cards because I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, unfortunately. So if you're running a deck that has Nausicaa Sergeants, I think the Imperial Brigades, of course, the Darylin Soldiers, and any cards that you make, honestly, with maybe Ambassador or Arturia's Vigo, or even the Runestone. Like, if you plan on creating cards that let you summon more soldiers, that would be great to sort of help this card out as well. But the only downside I can see for this card is that it is easily removable. Well, not easily removable, but like it can be removed by them ATs. And I think Alzur's Thunder is the only card that can really damage this thing, where you only have to use one card to do it. Otherwise, if you're planning to use other cards that only do 4 damage, you're going to need to find that one extra damage output, whether it's from an order or from a leader ability, etc. So because of that, this card can still actually be very powerful. I can definitely see it being played in a control soldiers deck for Nilfgaard. Just because that's getting that extra damage every time you play a soldier is going to be pretty powerful. I think. Obviously, it's not going to be targeted, so you can't really plan out your removal strategies if you plan on trying that out. Just simply because you just don't know who it's going to hit, unless of course they only have 1 unit then. And the last card I have here is, again, a really familiar face. This is called the Nian Elite. It is a 5 provision with 1 power and 4 armor. And on deploy, it boosts itself by 6, but if this card has no armor, it resets down to 1. So that is actually a pretty powerful card, actually. But the thing is, it has to be able to maintain its armor. And that's going to be hard, kind of, because 4 armor is not a lot. It's actually not a lot at all. If it was 5 armor, I can see it being more powerful, but with only 4 armor, it can be somewhat easy to remove. Of course, if not by 1 turn, but for sure by 2 turns, it'll be easy to remove. And unfortunately, there is no way of getting that deploy back again unless you have a card that lets you repeat it, which I don't think that's the case. But it is a pretty cheap card. It's not that bad. If it had maybe 1 more power, that might have been a little bit better. But yeah, so I don't know how I feel about this card. I'm a little bit okay with it, I suppose. I mean, I'll definitely try it out to see what kind of value it'll have with sort of the other cards that are going to be introduced. Because again, I don't think this is going to be the full reveal. As more cards are getting revealed, though, I will definitely share them. My apologies if this video is going to have a lot of edits, just because I feel like I should have, I mean, I don't want to say I scripted it, but like, I just sort of wanted to share my initial thoughts with you guys, like what I first thought about these cards when I first saw them. And as you can tell, it was a bit of a mess, but hey, you know what? I'm actually pretty excited. I'm liking a lot of these cards. I'm actually really excited to see in gameplay. And hopefully as more cards come out, I'll be able to share them with you guys. And let me know what your thoughts are on these new cards. There are other cards here. Actually, I just want to share a couple more things. And I think these are actually pretty important because for these new keywords that are coming with it, I think I've already gone through them in the last video, but if you guys want sort of a reminder, then here you go. And the notes here, I think, is the pretty important ones. So one key thing here is that bleeding does go through armor. So bleeding sort of affects you, like, that kind of makes sense because bleeding hits you like personally, like, as a physical body. So armor obviously is not going to help you with bleeding. Armor is not a status, so Purify does not remove it, which is pretty good if you plan on using your Pellers or your your Dialects from the Nilfgaard faction to remove armor. It's not going to happen. But Defender is a status, so if the unit is locked, destroyed, or purified, it loses that Defender status. So from the last video, Defender is a keyword where this card must be targeted first before you target any other cards. And if that card loses Defender, your engine cards or the cards that you're trying to protect are wide open for attacks. So that's something to watch out for. So anyway, I thought I'd just share those just because I think these are actually pretty important. So if you guys go like, oh, how come armor doesn't get removed when it gets purified? Because it's not a status. It's sort of like an extra power, but it's not actually power. It's sort of a defense mechanism, which is great. So anyway, let me know what you guys thought about these new cards being revealed. Like if you enjoyed this video, comment on obviously any changes that you guys liked or maybe didn't like, and what you guys thought of some of these. I think 2 of these cards are making comebacks, which is actually pretty good. And subscribe for more Gwent videos. And other than that, this is Enzo signing out. I'll catch you guys in the next one.